Hi there. All right. So I had a couple people make comments about how they would like to see me continue to post videos for this project. So I'm going to continue working on this one while I'm live. And as you can see, I've made some progress since the last live video. For those of you who didn't see the posts about the brown for the trees, I have made some progress here. So we went ahead and added that brown tree base color. I am going to add some lighter colors to the kind of the higher parts of that. Let some of the darks stay, or some of the shadows stay a little darker. I'm going to use a wash on this, and I thought maybe I was going to go with a soft tone wash, but I don't think that's going to give me kind of the shadows that I want from the tree. So I might go with like a strong wash for that. I'm trying to still decide kind of which one of these browns I want to use for the highlights. Obviously that darker one is the brown that I used for the base on the tree branches. So that's oak brown. I've got ancient tree, I think leather brown, and monster fir are the other three in order from darker to lightest. And so I'm not sure yet which one I'm going to use. But for now, I think what I'm going to start with doing is I'm going to put a little bit of this green wash on these tiles to see kind of how that turns out. I have a paper towel handy in case this doesn't look how I want it to look when I apply it. So we're going to kind of see together how this works. I did decide that I want to do gold for this larger section here as well as the point. And this area in between those, I'm going to do in the ivory white as well as these ones that are going up and down in the little tower there. The ones that cross across it are going to be gold, as well as this lower ring there, and these ones down that way. I always do my metallics last for several reasons, mainly because those gold flecks get into everything. I have a specific set of paintbrushes just for my gold, or just for my metallic paints, because once you get them in there, it's impossible to get those metal flecks out. And sometimes you'll be painting months later using a brush that you used for metallics, and there'll just be a random metal flake, like metal flake or a look of metallic color that just ends up in whatever you're painting, and that's annoying. So I have a set of brushes specifically for that. I often use another glass of water while cleaning the brushes as well, just because those metallic flecks can get into the water, and if you wash another brush in it, you can end up with those getting on your brush as well. So I'm just shaking up this green wash because I haven't used it in a while. I haven't used it since I did my green dragon a long time ago. Actually, it was like a serpent dragon that I did for Sean, who I had done that one custom for him. I have pictures of it on my Facebook. So, alright, I got that pretty well shaken up. Normally I would use my paint mixer, but I don't feel like plugging it in and doing that. So when you're working with washes and tones like this, you don't want to put them on your wet palette because they're already really thin and they'll just run if you put them on a wet palette. So I'm gonna move this over here, I think, for now, just kind of out of the way. I really need to come up with a better plan for how I want to utilize this space, but this is working for now in my tiny little apartment. Okay, so just gonna make sure that's stable so I don't accidentally knock it off, and I'm gonna try to keep this centered, even though it's kind of out in front of me in a weird way that I don't particularly like as far as working on this. Okay, so I got a little bit of the tone on my paintbrush, and then I'm just gonna start at the top and brush straight down and let it kind of just seep in there, and I'm just gonna do that over and over again until it kind of, see how it's getting darker in those recesses with that green. That's kind of what I want all the way down. So we're just going to make sure that fills in all the little cracks, and then we're going to let it dry like that. And that's going to add that darker shadow, really bring out those dark greens that I had done originally before I put on the teal. That's really going to pop there and give this roof more of a green look rather than a blue look, which is what I wanted. So just really let gravity do its thing here. Pull everything deep in. And it's okay if I get a little bit of that green on some of these other areas, but I don't want it to stain and kind of create a weird pool. So I will try to get any extras off if I notice it in an area that I don't actually want it to be in. That's looking pretty good for that one. I'm just gonna let that kind of set like that while I work on the next section. And by the time, I'm hoping by the time I get done with all these, that first one will kind of be dry-ish, so I can really see how that's gonna look when it's all said and done. I'm hoping this looks as good as I'm hoping it'll look. If it's not, I'm going to basically have to go back and paint over the wash, which is not really all that fun. The more layers of paint you put on a figure, the more detail that you tend to lose. And so, you know, I don't want to lose any of that detail. So I want to try to keep number of layers that I end up doing to a minimum. This might not be the best brush for that. I'm going to use a smaller brush in a minute to try to get just a little bit of wash into that crevice there. And you can see how this wash just kind of flows into all the spaces. All I really have to do is just kind of touch it, let it fall off the brush, and it just flows in and fills all the space. That's why washes are so thin, is so that they can behave more like a true liquid and not like a paste like a lot of paints do. Like, they're thick and they stick and they adhere, which is nice for getting some color onto your mini, but when you need to fill in the void spaces, a wash is definitely the way to go for that. It's going to give you a lot more deep coverage, because it's going to just flow into the deepest possible spot, just like, you know, a river running downhill. It runs into the deepest possible spaces. So just more coming down here. Yeah, that's already looking a lot better. I really like the look of that. And once that's fully dried, we're going to really see that green pop, I think. There's some areas that just don't want to seem to take this. I don't know if it's because just not as deep as others, or there's some that's got maybe a little too much in there. I'll try to get a little bit of it out of this spot right here. Sometimes when you have too much wash in an area, you can just dry your brush all the way off and just kind of tap your brush in there, and it'll soak up a little bit of that. It's like it just wicks it up. So that's a good way to get a little bit of that. And I'm just looking in the camera here to see what looks like there's enough and what doesn't. So we're gonna just there we go. Looks even. It's easier to see sometimes if you just use the camera, or sometimes like I'll use my flashlight to really shine on it and see kind of how the light seems to be hitting it, to see how it looks, because sometimes it can be really hard to tell just with the naked eye, just looking at it. So it can be difficult sometimes to keep it nice and even, which is what you're really going for here, is a nice even coat. Make sure it looks uniform all the way through to really, give that consistency that you want from the mini, so it doesn't look too hastily done or too kind of amateur or whatever. Also, I usually try to go kind of the same direction. Instead of like going up against this, I try to go down and let it flow in, but some spaces like this are kind of hard to get into, so you start kind of trying to fit it in there, but you can end up creating a bit of a mess if you're not careful, and get it all over everything. I don't need a whole lot in there, but I do want just a little bit of that green to kind of hint in that space. Okay. Oops. Try not to touch like I just did. That's like, if you touch these areas that are wet, they're gonna dry with what looks kind of like a coffee stain, like where it's just like smudged, like, so you don't want to touch it if you can avoid it, and that was my fault. That's too much in there. I'm definitely going to need to get a little bit of that out of that space, even though it's going to be a little darker in there because it's in like kind of a shadow of a tree branch. I still don't want it to be too dark. Same thing with right here at the tree branch. Like, it's not going to be a big problem, but it's definitely going to look a little weird because it'll dry darker than the rest of it around it. I need to get a little more green wash here in my palette here in a second. I'm almost out. Set that there for a second. Do a quick little wash on my brush here. Try to get a little bit of that out. I like this. This is a Paint Puck brand water cup. It has the little holder for all the brushes around the edge, which is nice. What you don't see in there, because the water is gunky, is that there's a little silicone little thing at the bottom of this that's got like raised little nubs, so you can rub your brush against it, and it really helps separate the bristles just enough to get the paint off of the brush. And then when you dry it, you can just hang them on those little hooks there, like I have, and let it dry downwards so that the water doesn't run backwards into the ferrule and bring any extra paint or anything like that into that, which can damage your bristles. If the water comes down into this ferrule here with paint in it, when it dries, it's going to dry hard and it's going to force your bristles to separate, and it'll dry out kind of like that with like weird little shape issues. So, you know, sometimes you can correct that by using like a brush soap, get it really nice and lathered, let that kind of run down there, and it can sometimes clean out the ferrule, but it's best practice to try never to dry your brushes up like that. Always dry them down like this so that the water can run down off the tip. And so I'm just going to hang that for a second and get some more of this green tone on my palette, because we still have about 4 or 5 of these little triangles left to do. So I'm going to really fill this up. I think I put about half of a palette space full of tone there to the first time, and that wasn't enough. So I'm going to kind of tap this down, really let that kind of start to settle towards the ends and into the recesses. This next spot's going to be hard. I didn't ever go back and get that little spot in here either. I'm going to use this 4-0 liner brush. You can see it's got a really, really fine tip on it. That's going to be easy for getting into these tiny spaces. And it holds the paint pretty well. I like this brand of brushes. I picked them up as a set a while back, and they've done a pretty good job of serving me well over the years. Okay, got just a little more of that in there, I think. Just to really, there we go. Drive home the fact that that's a shadowed recess. As far as this next part goes, I'm really not sure how I want to try to get this wash onto most of these little tiny ones behind the tree branches. I've got a lot of different brushes. There's a lot of different options here. I have some round brushes that might work pretty well, but I don't feel like they're going to coat as evenly, because they're going to come to a point, and so you're just going to be like, Alright, we're going to start with the same flat brush we've been using, and we're just going to kind of wing it. Just try to get it up in there as best we can. That's too much. That's okay. Try to drag some of that out and put it down in there. I'm not going to load as much onto the brush while working in these recesses, just because I really don't want too much of this tone in there. There we go. I'm going to try not to let these live videos go too long. I don't know if there's a way to see how long it's been going. My phone's upside down because of the way that it's set on the lamp, so it's hard to see what is actually happening. I also am not watching it while I'm painting, obviously, so anyone who likes or comments, just know I'm not ignoring you, and I appreciate the support. And I will reply to and like any comments when I am done. So, but I don't want these videos to go super long. I know sometimes I'll get caught up in a video that somebody's made and I'll watch for a long time if it's really interesting, But I can't imagine anyone wants to watch me paint for more than a few minutes. I mean, that's literally like watching paint dry at that point. I mean, who wants to watch that? And I'm not all that entertaining anyway, so we're just gonna try to keep these short, fun, just focused on the progress and less on, viewer content or whatever. We're just gonna try to get through each step as quickly as I can. Right now, obviously, we're working on this shade. That's a lot in that section, so I'm gonna try to empty this out and steal a little bit from over here. I don't want to steal too much though, because it is looking good. It's nice and even all the way down, but there's just a lot in there. There, that's maybe a little better. Steal just a little bit from here. Actually, this brush is working better than I expected it to for this area. It's a good brush. I do like this brush quite a lot. It's funny because I've bought a lot of like really nice, expensive brushes. I've got some Winsor Newtons and different, name brand brushes that people will swear by. And they're great brushes, don't get me wrong. I'm oftentimes a little afraid to use them because of how expensive they were. But at the same time, they are good, consistent brushes. And so, I mean, if you've got the money, it's worth investing in a nice sable brush. But I often default to some of these cheaper brushes that I bought when I first started this hobby. And I don't regret it. I don't think that that's a problem. I think that they're good brushes, they're consistent brushes, and they've served me well over the years. So I do oftentimes find myself going back to them when I need just a reliable brush to get a project done. So if you're ever interested in starting painting or you're thinking about it, don't be afraid to just go to your local art store and pick up some cheap, paintbrushes for just a couple dollars. I mean, my first ones were actually part of this set right here. They're just these cheap blue Princeton brushes, and this one has an angle on it, which is great for getting up in under things. It's really a great brush. But I didn't spend a lot on my first set of brushes. My first brushes were just ones that they happened to have at our local art store here, and I started with a very basic set of paints. I just went to my local hobby store and got some Citadel paint pots of some colors for a little mini I was trying to do. And the first miniature I ever painted, actually, my ex-wife and I had gone on a date night to the comic book store, and they were doing a mini paint tutorial kind of thing, and we each got a Beholder mini, and we each got to paint it, and they showed us some techniques and some hints on how to make it look better, and that was really a lot of fun. So I had some paints left over from that night, because I bought kind of a introductory set that had like a little mini and like I think 5 or 6 D&D inspired paint themes, and a brush I think was in there, and that was it, and so I just started with some very basic stuff, and I think that some of my earlier stuff actually has turned out better than some of my more recent stuff, just because I tend to overthink it now. When I started out, I would go very simple, very, basic color schemes, just working with what little I had, and it was just simple, but it worked, a blue cape instead of trying to do, a base and mids and a highlight color. It was just blue and then a wash. And that worked really well for, some of those earlier minis. And then I'd go back and sometimes I'd highlight with like just a white, just to kind of on the raised parts, kind of give it that, oh, this is closer to the light source kind of look. But it was never anything too complicated. So, I mean, this hobby only has to be as complicated as you make it. It's more about just having fun and creating something that you're proud of at the end of the day. And I feel like I do that. I feel like when I'm painting, it's really easy because I'm kind of a perfectionist to kind of obsess about whether or not things are done to a level of perfectionism that I would be happy with. But when I can get out of my own head a bit and really just sit back and enjoy painting like I am kind of right now, it's really an enjoyable hobby. Looks like I need just a little more in this kind of ridge line over here. That's pretty good. Okay, we got 3 of these left. That first one's drying pretty well. I added a little bit to some of them just because it was really kind of coming out a little flat. But I'm liking that. I'm really liking the way that's looking with those kind of green with the hint of that teal. And I mean, I am still planning to go back very lightly with this bright green as a highlight color and just running it down kind of the high ridges right where the light is going to be the strongest, and highlight along the edges of these raised tiles, and I think that'll really look really good. So it's nice to have another one of these triangles that are mostly tree free. The rest of this mini, I say mini because that's kind of what I'm used to painting, but the rest of this model has more tree branches and more of these kind of roof tiles on some of the window coverings and things like that. And that's going to be interesting to paint down the road. But for now, this is really looking good. And so I've got to try to remember. It's kind of nice to have these videos because I guess if I forget what paints I use or anything like that, I can just go back and watch the video again and be like, oh yeah, that's the color scheme I was going for. And those were the paints I used. And I can sort of remind myself so that I can keep a consistent look throughout the whole model. That's one of the things about a bigger project like this is, sometimes I'll mix a color of paint between 2 different colors, like I did with the original green base for this, and then it dries up by the time I get back to needing it again, or I run out and I have to mix more, and so trying to keep it consistent can be difficult. I would advise you to use dropper bottles and count the number of drops that you put in. So if you do 1 part red, 1 part yellow to make kind of an orange, write that down so that it's for every 1 drop of red you put a drop of yellow, or if it's 1 to 2 or whatever. That way you just can always make the same tone for your paints instead of doing what I did and just randomly mixing them together on a palette until it looks like the color you want. So I guess my advice is do everything the right way, don't do it the way I do it. Let's see here. This tree branch is not making this one easy. It's a tall tree branch, first of all, which creates like a really deep kind of crevice underneath it. So getting in there to try to deposit this paint is actually kind of difficult. And then, where's that liner brush? Let's just get some of this on there and use that to really get in there. One of the problems I have with this hobby is that this kind of the same reason I have a hard time writing on a whiteboard or a chalkboard, is I have a hard time writing or doing anything if I can't rest my hand while doing it. And a lot of this is kind of free floating, you know, you're holding the model, you're painting like this, there's nowhere to rest your hand. So you'll see me oftentimes like push it up against and use my pinky. But it can be very difficult to get the right angle on things, and still try to, you know, have that stability. And if I can't rest my hand like this, you'll see I tend to shake a little bit, like, and it makes it really hard to get crisp, clean color onto a small space of a mini. And so it is one of the things I struggle with. But you know, everybody kind of has their own burdens to bear, I think. I don't even know if I'm in frame. I haven't looked at the phone in a minute. I am doing my best, guys. I'm sorry. I am not a cinematographer by any means. I am not good at the video aspect of this at all. Like, honestly, it's a little bit difficult for me. I'm going to try to really get these deep down in there. Try to get a little bit of this middle one out. There's a lot in there. I don't really like how much is in that, so we're really gonna just clean this off, dry that off a bit, and just suck up a little bit of that. There we go. Use that. That's pretty good. Alright, last one. And then I think we'll end this video, and I might start another one right afterwards. And people don't have to obviously watch that one live, or, I mean, obviously nobody has to watch anything I do, but I will save it to my Facebook and upload it to my Instagram like I did the first one. I might create, well, I have a YouTube channel. I've just never added anything on there. I might upload these to YouTube just to, I don't know what I want. I don't know why I would. Maybe I won't. Seems pointless to me. It's not like anyone's going to go on YouTube and search up mini painting and want to watch me do this, so I think we'll leave it to the professionals to do YouTube tutorial videos or whatever. But I do think I will do another video right after this as I, once this all dries, where I put the midtones and the highlights onto the tree, and what little wash I'm going to actually put on there. Because of the shape of it, the wash is just going to pool around the edges anyway. I don't know that I'm actually going to do an actual wash with it. I'll probably just barely put any on a small brush and just kind of use it to glaze the tree branches a little bit. just to add a little bit of depth, but it's not going to settle, because the point of a wash is to settle into the recesses, and I don't want it to settle in around the base of the tree, because that's where I've got this green now anyway, and it's kind of doing that same thing that a brown wash would do, which is add those shadows deep underneath the branch. And so I don't really need a brown wash under there, I don't think. Alright, and just like that, we are done applying our green tone to this mini. And as you can see, we're back at our first one. There's some that still look a little darker because they had more of that wash in there, but you can see kind of how that, where they're dry, how it's kind of looking now. And I think that's exactly kind of the tone I was looking for, kind of that aged copper sort of look. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what material I'm trying to think this is supposed to be. You know, I wasn't really kind of going for a copper, but I wanted that look. I'm not thinking that it's metal. In my mind, it's more of a stone, kind of like a terracotta style tile or something. I don't know, but I think it looks good. I think that the wash is really doing what it's supposed to do, and so I think it's going to look good when it's all said and done. I'm going to do a quick layer of wash over. Actually, first I'm going to put some mids, then I'm going to wash, and really let that kind of difference between the mid and the dark on the tree branches kind of contrast with the way that the soft tone sets on them. And then I'll do highlights with a bright brown, you know, up on kind of the tops of the tree branches, anywhere where it looks like the sun would hit more effectively, and leave some darks down in the recesses and let it really kind of get some depth there. And then once I've done all that, I'll move on to this spire. I'll do the white first, and then we'll just have just the gold left to do. So I think I should be able to get all this done in the next video. So if you're interested, if you're having fun watching this, then, you know, feel free to join me for the next one, and like this video. Feel free to share it to anyone that's interested in mini painting, and we'll just continue with this project in the next one. Thanks, guys.